to appear. It's not very deep yet, but this is the first way we're going to see phenomenology at work. So there are three ways that the world can start to show up through equipment. The first of those is called conspicuousness. And for the first time in reading Heidegger, we're already up into page 100, this is where you start to see how brilliant his mind is and the value of doing phenomenology. This is where you start to see, oh, that's an interesting insight. It's not quite as deep as we're going to get, because he's going to push this as just an appearance that's going to give us insight into something even deeper. But we're going to start with this. So we have conspicuousness, obtrusiveness, and obstinacy. These are the three ways or structures. They're existentiality. These are things we experience that we exist through. They are factical in some ways, or have to do with our facticity, or our care, or our concern. Three ways that the ready to hand break down, where we start to see presence at hand, and in that crack between the ready to hand and the present at hand is the world, or something like the world will emerge. So I'm going to define these terms for you carefully, and I'm going to try to give you examples that will help you to see how they work. And then you should be able to see this happening in your everyday life if you pay attention. Heidegger would say there is some value in doing that, because you're going to start to see what is your world if you pay attention to how it breaks down. So conspicuousness is this. It is simply when something fails to work. It breaks. The way Heidegger says it essentially is when something which is there, which is ready to hand, becomes unusable. When equipment becomes unusable, it becomes conspicuous as equipment. So here's an example. My friend who's off trying to save his job, he's got to build this little wall frame so that the bricks can come and the brick masons can do their work. And he shows up and he pulls out his hammer and he starts hammering, and the head of the hammer, which does a lot of the work, just flies off. He's like, boom, 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 and nothing. It's suddenly all really light, right? Okay, what is the first thing he's going to do when that head of the hammer goes off?
Look where it's going.
He might, but before he even looks to see where it went, what's he going to do first? Think really practically here.
Feels the difference?
He's going to feel the difference, and then what? Where is his eyes going to go? He's going to go like this, right? He's going to go, and then suddenly really light, and he's going to go, right? And he's going to keep looking at it. He's going to look at it, and he's going to look around like to see if he can find it. Then he's going to look back at it, and he's going to look around, because what's he going to see in his hand now? So when he looks down at his hand, what does he see? Does he see a hammer? No. He sees an unusable hammer, right? What does he see? He sees the absence of the usability of the hammer. He sees a stick now, right? And he's going to look for the rest of it. It's become unusable. So for the first time, what a hammer is becomes really conspicuous. It's conspicuous because it's not in the background just being used as a hammer. The hammer as a hammer is the farthest thing from his mind when he's hammering. But when it breaks and becomes unusable, then he goes, what the? Where is my hammer? What am I going to hammer with now? Right? And if he can't find the head of the hammer, if it's like gone and, I don't know, some rabbit takes off with it and drags it down the hole, he's going to have to think, what is hammering all about? And what am I going to use now? And he's going to start looking, and suddenly what are rocks going to stand out as? Possible hammers now, right? Could I use that, the hammer? Because I can't lose my job, and I don't have time to run to the hardware store and get another hammer. And The more that this is unusable, and the more important it is that it was usable, the more and more conspicuous what a hammer is becomes to him. Right? It just jumps out at him. Whereas before, when it was most a hammer, it was the farthest thing from being a hammer in his mind. It's just hammering with it, right? Does that make sense? Conspicuousness? Conspicuousness is when something is unusable, you start to see it as the thing that it is present at hand merely, because it is no longer ready to hand. It is now unready to hand, and therefore becomes mockingly present at hand. Like the more that he can't find something to hammer with, the more he's going to look at that thing and curse it, be mad at it. It's like it's going, you don't have a hammer, you don't have a hammer, right? It's conspicuous in its unreadiness to hand. But now if he calls time out right there, what he might see is what his world was all about. What his world was all about is assigning care to equipment. And what mattered in his world is that that equipment functioned as equipment, and he cared an awful lot about it, even though he didn't realize it. He didn't know how much he cared about that equipment until it became conspicuous. And the more conspicuous it became, the more care shows itself. But does he know it is care? No, he's just mad. And he's angry about hammers. And so he's not seeing the world yet. He's just seeing equipment. He's seeing unreadiness to hand. But in that unreadiness to hand, care as a arbitrary assignment of meaning or matteringness to something shows up. What makes a hammer so important? Dasein does. Dasein is the only thing that can make something that is just a hammer suddenly so important, right? You can find people who care so much about things that they will scream and cry and yell and lose their heads over it, right? The more and more you assign the matteringness of care to equipment, and that equipment breaks down, the more you are face to face with your ability to assign care. But you will not face that. What you will do is go, where in the hell is my hammer? What am I going to do now? How am I going to hammer? And the more that the hammering is conspicuous, the more your frustration is disturbed, the more care as your whole world becomes apparent. All you are is care. You just throw it into this hammer. You throw it into that pen. You throw it into that paper. You throw it into things. And as long as those things hold your care and work as ready to hand, you don't even realize it. Just do it. That's it. It's just the background, right? But when they become conspicuous and unusable, your care bubbles up. But you still don't see it. What you see as something present at hand. That's what you see. But that can happen only because of the world that gives rise to things like ready to hand and present at hand. Does this make some sense? Right? So when things break down, my time's up. All right. My clock became conspicuous.